Today, Ben Barnes joins us to read an excerpt, apart from the beloved novel, Prince Caspian, that the film is based on. Now, please put your hands together and help me welcome Ben Barnes. Thank you.
How are you doing? It's hot, huh?
Oh shit, you have
Thank you so much for coming, Ben. We're so glad you're here.
My pleasure.
Whatever. Go away, little
a little bit
girl.
about the movie, please.
Yes, well, the movie is about Prince Caspian, who at the beginning of the movie is forced to escape from his castle where he lives and join forces with the four Pevensey kids from the first movie.
Yeah.
And reawaken all the magic in Narnia, all the trees and the animals, and then fight against his Telmarines, his own people.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see
Whatever, I'm
it
not
when it
good.
comes out.
Me neither.
What was it like to find out that you were the starring role in the major motion picture?
It was amazing. It was amazing. When I found out I got the part, I just ran around my house screaming, and yeah, I'm still completely overexcited about it. I still don't really believe it, but yeah,
It's gonna be amazing.
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's quite great.
It looks like this film is going to have a lot of exciting action sequences. What kind of training did you have to do to prepare for the role of Prince Caspian?
Well, when I first got to New Zealand, where we shot the movie, I had to do a couple of weeks of horse training. I was on horseback 5-6 hours a day, which is quite painful if you haven't done it before. And then I had to do a lot of sword fighting training, and so I could look cool in the final battle sequences.
That's so cool. Were you a fan of the Narnia books before your cast as Prince Caspian?
Yeah, when I got the part, I went to find my old copy of the book, and it had I'd written in the front, "This book belongs to Benjamin Barnes," and I found out I'd read it when I was 8 years old.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I love that book too.
Me too.
Several of them. Alright, and now Ben is going to read from the book Prince Caspian. So take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay.
This is gonna be fun.
Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis. I'm not going to read the whole thing, I promise.
Darn!
Chapter 4. Prince Caspian lived in a great castle in the centre of Narnia with his uncle Miraz, the king of Narnia, and his aunt who had red hair and was called Queen Prunaprismia. His father and mother were dead, and the person whom Caspian loved best was his nurse. And though, being a prince, he had wonderful toys which would do almost anything but talk, he liked best the last hour of the day when the toys had all been put back in their cupboards and nurse would tell him stories. He did not care much for his uncle and aunt, but about twice a week his uncle would send for him and they would walk up and down together for half an hour on the terrace at the south side of the castle. One day while they were doing this, the king said to him, "Well, boy, we must soon teach you to ride and use a sword. You know that your aunt and I have no children, so it looks as if you might have to be king when I'm gone. How shall you like that, eh?" "I don't know, uncle," said Caspian. "Don't know, eh?" said Miraz. "Why, I should like to know what anyone more could wish for." "All the same, I do wish," said Caspian. "What do you wish?" asked the king. I wish I could have lived in the old days," said Caspian. He was only a very little boy at the time. Up till now, King Miraz had been talking in the tiresome way that some grown-ups have, which makes it quite clear they're not really interested in what you're saying. But now he suddenly gave Caspian a very sharp look. "Eh, what's that?" he said. "What old days do you mean?" "Oh, don't you know, uncle," said Caspian, "when everything was quite different, when all the animals could talk, and there were nice people who lived in the streams and the trees, naiads and dryads they were called, and there were dwarves, and there were lovely little fauns in all the woods, and they had feet like goats, and—" "That's all nonsense for babies," said the king sternly. "Only fit for babies, do you hear? You're getting too old for that sort of stuff. At your age, you ought to be thinking of battles and adventures, not fairy tales." "Oh, but there were battles and adventures in those days," said Caspian. "Wonderful adventures. There was a white witch, and she made herself queen of the whole country, and she made it so that it was always winter. And then 2 boys and 2 girls came from somewhere, and so killed the witch, and they were made kings and queens of Narnia, and their names were Peter and Susan and Edmund and Lucy. And so they reigned for ever so long, and everyone had a lovely time, and it was all because of Aslan."
Sat down in the shade for a minute.
"Who's he?" said Miraz. And if Caspian had been a very little older, the tone of his uncle's voice would have warned him that it would be wiser to shut up. but he babbled on. "Oh, don't you know," he said, "Aslan is the great lion who comes from over the sea." "Who's been telling you all this nonsense?" said the king in a voice of thunder. Caspian was frightened and said nothing. "Your Royal Highness," said King Miraz, letting go of Caspian's hand, which he'd been holding till now, "I insist upon being answered. Look me in the face. Who has been telling you this pack of lies?" "Nurse," faltered Caspian, and burst into tears. "Stop that noise," said his uncle, taking Caspian by the shoulders and giving him a shake. "And never let me catch you talking or thinking either about all those silly stories again. There were never those kings and queens. How could there be two kings at the same time? And there's no such person as Aslan, and there are no such things as lions, and there never was a time when animals could talk. Do you hear?" "Yes, uncle," sobbed Caspian. "Then let's have no more of it," said the king. Then he called to one of the gentlemen in waiting who was standing at the far end of the terrace and said in a cold voice, "Conduct His Royal Highness to his apartments and send His Royal Highness's nurse to me at once." Next day, Caspian found what a terrible thing he'd done, for Nurse had been sent away without even being allowed to say goodbye to him, and he was told he was to have a tutor. Caspian missed his nurse very much and shed many tears, and because he was so miserable, he thought about the old stories of Narnia far more than before. He dreamed of dwarves and dryads every night, and tried very hard to make the dogs and cats in the castle talk to him, but the dogs only wagged their tails, and the cats only purred. Caspian felt sure that he would hate the new tutor, but when the new tutor arrived about a week later, he turned out to be the sort of person it was almost impossible not to like.
Maybe not.
He was the smallest and also the fattest man Caspian had ever seen. He had a long, silvery, pointed beard which came down to his waist, and his face, which was brown and covered with wrinkles, looked very wise, very ugly, and very kind. His voice was grave, and his eyes were merry, so that until you got to know him really well, it was hard to know when he was joking and when he was serious. His name was Dr. Cornelius. Of all his lessons with Dr. Cornelius, the one that Caspian liked best was history. Up till now, except for Nurse's stories, he'd known nothing about the history of Narnia, and he was very surprised to learn that the royal family were newcomers in the country. "It was your Highness's ancestor Caspian I," said Dr. Cornelius, "who first conquered Narnia and made it his kingdom. It was he who brought all your nation into the country. You're not native Narnians at all. You're all Telmarines. That is, you came from the land of Telmar, far beyond the western mountains. That's why Caspian I is called Caspian the Conqueror." "Please, Doctor," asked Caspian one day, "who lived in Narnia before we all came out here to Telmar?" "No men, or very few, lived in Narnia before the Telmarines took it," said Dr. Cornelius. "Then who did my great-great-grandsesters conquer?" "Whom, not who, Your Highness," said Dr. Cornelius. "Perhaps it's time to turn from history to grammar." "Oh, please, not yet," said Caspian. "I mean, wasn't there a battle? Why is he called Caspian the Conqueror if there was nobody to fight with him?" "I said there were very few men in Narnia," said the doctor, looking at the little boy very strangely through his great spectacles.